What's up, everybody, and welcome into episode 87 of the Liquid Trucking Podcast. I am Marcus, your host. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Man, we got an exciting episode planned for you, and I will tell you right now, it is a deep interview that we've got planned for you today, and we'll get to it here in just a moment. I do want to touch a little bit on some new stuff that we're getting going here on the podcast that I'm very excited about. You heard us do our first ever liquid trucking draft a couple weeks ago. I had Jake Debo from the recruiting department on, and we drafted our barbecue sides, right? So that's one of our recurring segments that we're adding to the show. And next week, we're going to add in another one. I don't want to give up what the topic of next week's entire episode is, like the whole theme. But one thing we will be doing is we'll be adding in our Mount Rushmore. I'm going to bring on some drivers, and I will ask them to give me their Mount Rushmore of vehicle manufacturers, okay? So that's coming up next week. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, man, we haven't talked about what we're driving around on our off time in a really long time, and I got a bunch of gearhead buddies, and all we want to do is talk about it. Great. We've got an episode coming up for you, and we're also going to put our Mount Rushmores together of our top favorite vehicle manufacturers, so make sure to stay tuned. That's next week right here on the Liquid Trucking Podcast. That episode will launch August the 6th. And, of course, if you're interested in getting on any of our episodes, you can always do a couple different things. You can send me an email, podcast@liquidtrucking.com. If you have questions or comments about the show, if you'd like to suggest something that you want to hear about, you want to come on for an episode, if you hate everything about what I'm doing here and have a 15-page critique for me, I will read it. Look, I'm not going to be happy the whole time, but you got to take criticism in this line of work, and I'm more than happy to do so. Some of you drivers have told me before, like, hey, I didn't really like that, or hey, I really enjoyed that one, or the podcast is boring, or hey, the podcast is my favorite thing each week. I've gotten it all, and I'm still here, so nothing you're going to say is going to offend me, but all the things that you say are important. So go ahead and ship it off in an email when you're parked, podcast@liquidtrucking.com. And similar to podcast@liquidtrucking.com, the email address, we have podcast.liquidtrucking.com, which is the website. That's where you're going to find all of the things that have to do with the podcast, whether it be the episodes, who was in them, what we were talking about. There's also some fun metrics up there on the webpage that kind of show some driver scores and congratulate those who are doing the best in certain metrics. We also have a link up there right now that will take you to Truck Parking Club, where you can download the app and use my code TANKYANKER20, all lowercase, and get yourself $20 off your first booking with Truck Parking Club. And very important, I'm going to remind you of this every single time I tell you about that link. You still need to follow all the standard operating procedures with your parking. Do it the exact same way that you did it before. Let the same people know. Follow the same procedures. Just can find, or you can use Truck Parking Club, to find yourself a spot. It's that simple. And hey, $20 off your first booking might even get you a free spot for the night, because most of those bookings that I was looking at over at truckparkingclub.com are only $10 to $25 a night. So check it out. It's really cool. We're going to have Michael Lombard from Truck Parking Club back on the show here in a couple of weeks if everything works out. And we're aiming to get him on with friend of the Liquid Trucking Podcast, Dr. Mark Manera. I almost called him Mark Manera, and I swore I would never do that on this show, so I hope he's not listening. But we're going to have those guys on, and we're going to have another health and fitness episode. That's coming up in a couple of weeks. So lots of exciting stuff happening here on the Liquid Trucking Podcast. But one thing that has to happen right now is I need to get the hell out of the way for our next conversation. I'm going to be joined by Jason Eisenman from, of course, Liquid Trucking. You all know him. He's my guy, honorary co-host at this point. We're also going to be joined by Christopher Caldwell. He's a safety consultant for Safety Management Services Company, and Zaheer Iqbal from Tyler Technologies. And Tyler Tech actually runs the PSP, the Pre-Employment Screening Program for the FMCSA. Why are we bringing these guys on right now? Well, first of all, they have a truckload, you like what I did there? A truckload of experience in the transportation industry and also outside of the transportation industry. And in one case, maybe you could just look at this as just on the other side of the fence. a really interesting conversation with a ton of great information. And you drivers are going to love this because they're touching on ways that you can keep track of your data, keep track of your information, and do it all free of charge and just with a click. So it's just packed with great information, this interview coming up. And I'm excited to bring it to you guys. Here's my interview with Christopher Caldwell from SMSC, Jason Eisenman from Liquid Trucking, and Zaheer Iqbal from Tyler Technologies. Enjoy.
Welcome to the gold standard of podcasts for the gold standard of drivers. This is the Liquid Trucking Podcast with your host, Marcus Bridges.
All right, welcome back in here to the Liquid Trucking Podcast. This next segment is going to cover a lot of information from some very talented individuals and with a lot of really good experience, both within and without the trucking industry. So let's kick it off right now. Three gentlemen joining me here today. One voice that you will recognize for sure is Jason Eisenman, VP of HR and Safety for Liquid Trucking. Jason, always good to have you back in, my friend.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Also joining us today is Zaheer Iqbal. He is a program and education analyst for Tyler Technologies. Zaheer, thank you so much for agreeing to come on today. You and I met at a pool party in Las Vegas, and you'll forever be one of my favorite professional contacts for that very reason, my friend. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And also joining us here today is Chris Caldwell. He's a safety consultant for Safety Management Services Company and works directly with Liquid Trucking, helping them stay compliant. Chris, thank you so much for being here today, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
Now, gentlemen, I want to start out by getting kind of a 30,000-foot view from you guys both about what you do for the companies you work for. So, Zaheer, we're going to go ahead and start with you. You're here today to kind of talk about Tyler Tech managing the PSP. So give us a little bit of insight here about what Tyler Tech does with the PSP and your role in that.
Absolutely. I'm a program and education analyst at Tyler Technologies, where I support the pre-employment screening program, also known as the PSP. I work closely with a wide range of stakeholders in the transportation industry, from motor carriers and industry service providers to drivers and national and state trucking associations to help them understand how PSP can improve safety and support better hiring decisions. A big part of my role involves attending conferences, trade shows, and other industry events to talk about PSP and connect directly with users. I really enjoy hearing feedback. It's one of the most rewarding parts of the job. We call them little, love notes when we get some positive feedback, and it's so encouraging. And it's also incredibly good to see how widely PSP has been adopted and how many companies are using the data to make informed, safety-driven hiring choices.
Yeah, of course. Well, we all know, we talk about it on this podcast all the time. Safety is of paramount concern. And of course, it's these two things are going to kind of connect for us a little bit here, and we'll get to how that is. But before I turn it over to Chris here, Zaheer, can you give me a little background of how you came to the position that you were in? Have you always been working in the transportation sector, or do you come from outside of the transportation sector?
Well, in my previous life, you would be surprised I worked for the U.S. military as a cultural advisor on the Pakistan-Afghanistan border, and that's how I ended up in the U.S. And I worked briefly for the Food and Drug Administration, and then I also worked with the United Nations in transportation capacity. But, in all these jobs, transportation has always been part of it. So that's how I got connected with the industry. And then I found an opportunity at Tyler Technologies, which is actually the largest company in North America that focuses entirely on technology for the public sector. We work with all levels of government, whether local, state, or federal, on a wide range of tech projects. So when it comes to PSP, Tyler serves as the third party provider, which means we run the system that gives carriers, drivers, and service provider access to PSP records. And our job is to make that experience smooth, secure, and easy to use. We don't control the data itself, but we help people access it in a way that supports safer and smarter hiring in the trucking industry. And beyond PSP, Tyler's also involved in a lot of other transportation related work like crash reporting system, inspection tools, and other softwares that helps agencies and the industry work better together. We were also just named to the GovTech 100 list for the ninth year in a row, which was a proud moment for us. It's a great recognition of how committed we are to helping the public sector and industries like trucking use technology to solve real world problems. And I'm happy to be part of the solution.
Yeah, I guess so, and especially when they're going to decorate you like that. Congratulations on the placement on that list here, and thank you for the rundown there. Now I'm gonna tie these two together here by tossing it over to Chris here real quick. As we said, Chris is a safety consultant for Safety Management Services Company and works directly with Liquid Trucking. But Chris, I know that you've got a little bit of experience on both sides of the aisle here. So talk to me about what you do for SMSC, and then tell me how you came into this position and what you did beforehand.
Sure. So what I do for SMSC is I provide a variety of different consulting services. These can range from taking a review of crash data, looking at where losses are occurring, identifying patterns and trends within a specific client. I provide an assessment on a yearly basis, and this assessment essentially evaluates a carrier or a client's ability to operate within a safe environment. Our services can range from single visits per year up to 6 or 7 visits per year, depending on what the client needs. As my background goes, I spent the last 11 years in the Wisconsin State Patrol. I was in the 59th recruit class. I started out as a roadside inspector. So I worked the road, but I didn't do any of the trooper stuff. What's unique about Wisconsin is that inspectors in the state of Wisconsin can do everything that a Wisconsin State Patrol trooper can do, but troopers can't do everything an inspector does.
Oh, I see.
So
Crafty.
for my 11 years, the last 9 of that, I taught hazardous materials. So I taught all 3 CBSA or NTC, however you want to, all the FMCSA classes, including general, other bulk, and cargo tank. For the last 5 years, I've taught NAS Part A, which is essentially driver qualifications and logbooks. I've been a subject matter expert for the state of Wisconsin for 7 of my last 11 years. And the previous 4 years before I retired in January of this year, I was with the Motor Carrier Investigation Unit, which means that I went into carriers as a representative of FMCSA. I did exactly what I do now, but I did it with a little bit more of an enforcement angle.
Okay. All right. Well, tell me how you, now, I guess, let me back up here for a second. You've got a lot of experience with the PSP system, obviously, being in the role that you were at before you came to SMSC. How do you apply your experience with a badge to your safety consulting now? I feel like a guy that's done the work that you've done in inspection with the state police has got so much insight for a trucking company, and you can tell them so many little just niche things that they can change that can really improve their scores and stuff. So talk to me a little bit about how you apply the knowledge you gained before you retired to the new job.
Sure. So in my previous role, we would come across carriers, clients, however you wanted to phrase it. We would have probably on, to be honest with you, Marcus, I would say maybe 30% of the side on the enforcement side actually use the PSP reporting mechanism. Usually the reason why we were visiting them would be something related to something that could have been caught on a PSP report versus what they were doing. So that was something that we would always push as we would go in and visit these carriers, these clients from the enforcement side, as we would talk about the PSP program and what kind of vital information is contained within the report, how long the report runs for, what it can possibly tell you as far as trends and possible outcomes that you can expect from a driver with certain driver behaviors. So we would really focus more on what are they compliant with, both on the state side for state laws and then on the federal side for the federal regulations. And we would get into those areas in my current role that we probably don't touch on as frequently as I would like to, but we would definitely get into some more of the niche stuff. Like hazmat has always been my thing, so I did a lot of hazmat related topics and training with clients as I was visiting them on the enforcement side. And we would be, I mean, I'm pretty well versed in regulations. So I would be able to identify some areas that maybe they were seeing patterns of behavior in that necessarily they didn't understand. They weren't able to extrapolate the data that they were seeing into an effective management program. So even on the enforcement side, that's kind of where my angle went. And I've kind of carried that over to this new role where I get more into the regulatory aspect of my role here with SMSC than I do on kind of the oversight role. And I find that they kind of overlap from time to time, but there is a distinct kind of differential line there. So I can provide a level of expertise on the regulatory side that maybe not everybody can provide.
Absolutely. And I was going to ask you this question. If you've listened to this podcast at all, it just right down the middle for me. Which one of these two gigs did you enjoy more? Are you loving the safety consultant thing? Do you miss being an inspection agent? What are you thinking right now? How do you like it?
Well, that's a loaded question. I'll say that right off the bat. So, I'll suffice it to say that I actually started looking for my second career back in 2024, and I had talked to a couple of different businesses that offer this same type of service. So when I really started to think about it and what I wanted to do in the second part of my career, I kind of wanted to split off, and I didn't want to necessarily do more of the enforcement angle. I was looking for something where we could take that natural anxiety that comes along with an enforcement action, such as a compliance review or an audit, and kind of take that out of the equation. As far as what I liked better, there's pros and cons to each. What I really liked about law enforcement was I got to talk to the drivers a lot more than what I get to talk to them now. Mm-hmm. And I found that drivers would have a certain perspective, and that perspective was not always reflective of the client or the carrier. And then when I would actually reach out and talk to the carrier, that you would see where this difference of opinion or this difference of perspective would actually manifest itself and kind of come to life, for lack of a better phrase. Mm-hmm. So I've been doing this for 6 months now, and I do enjoy it. I have a very heavy travel schedule. Most of my clients right now are front-ended at the front end of the year, so now I'm kind of getting into this period where I won't be traveling as much. And that was one of the things that I wasn't real happy with on the enforcement side is we were really limited when I could go out and teach, so I had to get approvals for all of that. And I would have liked to have done that more. It just was budgetary reasons and everything else. That was just not a reality. So I do miss the people that I work with on the enforcement side, and I miss talking to the drivers on a frequent basis. But being able to talk to the clients and the decision makers is enlightening. This is the way I'm going to say that.
Sure. I totally understand that. From the perspective of this podcast, we try to get as many drivers on here as possible. And that's the reason right there is that their perspective can be a little bit different. It can be vastly different, but we do find that just talking about it and trying to get everybody on the same page is beneficial. You know, the best thing we can do is communicate about these things. And Jason, I want to toss the ball to you here for just a second. After hearing a bit about what Zaheer and Chris had to say, are there any surprises or new information here that's come to light from a fleet management perspective? The reason I ask is because when we spoke to Zaheer and set this meeting up maybe a week or so ago, you had a little bit of an aha moment that you told me about, that you kind of you tuned into something that you didn't know was that way beforehand. So talk to me a little bit about this from the fleet side. Obviously, you work directly with Chris, and you've got plenty of experience with the PSP. So give me the fleet side perspective a little bit here, Jason, and kind of what you're thinking and what your aha moment was the other day.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not entirely sure of the aha moment. I have a couple in mind. One of them is when you brought Zaheer to the conversation after having met him at that conference, and I learned a little bit more about what Tyler Technologies does. I believe one of the aha moments you're talking about is from a fleet carrier side. I had no idea there was a company, managing that, and didn't understand what Tyler Technologies' role in it was. We know it as, the PSP program. And I think a lot of drivers would probably agree with that. So when I got the opportunity to talk to Zaheer and learn more about it, and then at the same time we were in discussions to bring Chris on from this our safety consulting side, I thought, what a great opportunity to bring together a conversation for our drivers and everybody that listens to something that, of course, they all know something about. They've heard about it at some point. The PSP. A lot of carriers use that data for hiring, and they're, some guys know more about it than others. So that was one of the aha moments, and the second was just the opportunity to get this conversation together to hear several sides of the fence, with Chris having his law enforcement background, his current safety management consulting, Zaheer from the management of a government platform that we all use, and then the carrier side. A good overall education opportunity to get some knowledge out to all of our listeners and drivers on something that we all, whether you know and love it or know and use it, it's there.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head with the aha moment. That was exactly what I was talking about. And Zaheer, I wanted to bring you back in here because Jason and I were talking about this after our meeting, and he brought up a really good question about the DataQ challenge process within the PSP. Does Tyler run that, the DataQ challenge process, or is that something that is done independent of Tyler? Can you talk me through that a little bit and what your involvement with the DataQ challenge process is?
It's interesting you asked that question, because we receive so many calls and emails and chat messages about the DataQs. So the DataQs system allows user to challenge, or challenge is not a good word, but request corrections to FMCSA data. But this is not run by Tyler. We receive calls, and we have excellent customer service. We receive great feedback about them. When they have a question about the DataQs, we refer them to the agency. So that is a subject that completely is run by FMCSA.
So I'm sure you're glad to get that out here on this podcast as well. Just one more way to try to reach out to the masses and let them know that you guys aren't the ones to target with whatever it is they're going after, correct?
That's absolutely correct. So if you have any requests for the DataQs, please go to the FMCSA's website, dataqs.fmcsa.dot.gov. But if you think there is a mistake on the PSP report, so you can also file a request for data review through the DataQs system, and PSP and Tyler Technologies has nothing to do with it. So it is completely under FMCSA.
Okay. Well, I will say thanks for the fantastic customer service that Tyler provides in directing them elsewhere, because I'm sure there's probably some of those calls that come through just a little hot under the collar. I understand it completely. So this is interesting. I want to stay on the DataQ challenge process here a little bit, because Chris, your experience with law enforcement there, how was it with the DataQ challenge process? Is this something that you saw come up all the time? Jason was talking me through it a little bit, told me that, Jason, if I'm not mistaken, that you can actually go in and, Zaheer said challenge is a bad word for it, but if you've got a citation or something that shows up, you can request a review of that. Is that kind of how I understand the system works?
Yeah, there's definitely criteria on what can be and can't be. And I think the word challenge is a great word from a carrier's side, because there's all in life, there's always different perspectives, and that's why I thought Chris would be able to levy some good insight, because those challenges go back to the issuing officer, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe it'd be good to flip it to Chris and see if he had a few of those come his way, or if he can levy some more advice on how that works behind the curtain, if you will.
Chris?
Sure. So I guess I didn't mention this little tidbit on the law enforcement side. So the last 4 years that I was with the Wisconsin State Patrol, I actually handled all the DataQs from the state of Wisconsin.
Oh, wow.
So I was the single point of contact for anything that dealt with a roadside inspection or a roadside inspection violation. So to the DataQ process, DataQ data quality, whatever you want to call it, requests for data review is what it's commonly referred to as, or an RDR. So just to expand on what Zaheer said, there's a couple of different ways that challenges or requests for review can be handled. So there's definitely the FMCSA side. When we talk about FMCSA and what they would review specifically on their ability to review certain information, FMCSA is going to be limited. I won't include PSPs in this, but I will include crashes, which is, if you don't know this, from a client perspective, when it comes to crashes, if your crash indicator basic gets to an elevated portion where it exceeds the basic threshold, a crash indicator basic is one of the primary reasons why FMCSA is going to come and see you. If you read their edict and their mission statement, the first word out of their mouth when they issue their mission statement is the FMCSA's primary goal, and I'm paraphrasing here, of course, is to reduce the number of crashes upon the roadway. So they handle crash reviews on a preventability standard. So there's a couple of different ways that crashes can be reviewed. For preventability, there's 21 different categories under which preventability can be issued a determination. And that's the way we phrase it, is that it would be issued a determination whether it meets preventability criteria or it does not. If a crash is determined to be not preventable by FMCSA standards, then it does not count towards your crash indicator basic. The other way that you can challenge a crash is through the state system, and that way you would be challenging the criteria of the crash. And what I mean by that is that if a crash doesn't meet the definition of a crash in the federal regulations, then that review is handled by the state as opposed to by, FMCSA. Mm-hmm. So that's just a little bit about how crashes work. For DataQs in general, anybody can have a DataQ account and can file and submit, if you will, requests for review. It's not limited. Me as a third-party contractor, as a consultant for Liquid, as long as they give me access to their DataQ system, and if they have questions about certain things, I can file DataQs on their behalf. A lot of these will be stuff that you look at a roadside inspection and you may believe that the violation was either documented incorrectly or that the violation was documented and it was not an appropriate violation. These are reasons why you would submit these in for review. Those requests are going to go to the state. So if you did an inspection in Nebraska and the violation that you want under review is on that inspection report, then you're going to submit that. It's going to go to the state of Nebraska. Now, the unique thing about the DataQs system is that each state kind of manages their own program, which means that we have 50 states out there. We have the potential for 50 different ways of doing this. So I will speak to what we do in Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, when you file a DataQ for a Wisconsin roadside inspection report, that would usually come to me. It would go through the process of an initial review on my end, and then I would reach out to the inspecting officer for additional information. We would have a discussion if need be, review the applicable regulations, and get more information and try to make a determination from there. Some states have committees. States such as Arizona and Minnesota have a mixed committee where they have both industry people, law enforcement people, and civilians that review these on a semi-regular basis. Other states will, as Jason said, send it to the reporting officer. Now, I'm going to tell you, FMCSA is going to frown upon that. There was some recent hubbub related to certain states doing that. So FMCSA does not really like the actual inspecting officer reviewing their own work for obvious reasons.
And I don't see why. I did great when I graded my own papers in junior high, Chris, so I don't understand why this is a problem.
That's exactly why they don't want you, why they frown upon you reviewing your own work, Marcus. That's exactly the reason. So when it comes to these reviews, FMCSA has a guidance that they put out to the states. They say that we'd like these adjudicated within 10 days. And I think it's just 10 business days. I don't think it's 10 calendar days. I don't remember off the top of my head. So as a person filing a request for data review or a DataQ, some tips and tricks for you real quick.
Yeah.
One, if it's crash related, you absolutely have to have a crash report. If a driver normally would not be filing a crash review, that would usually fall to the carrier or the client. So the first thing you need is, you absolutely need to have the police report. You need to have the actual police report, not a generated copy or a redacted version of it. You need the police report. In the event of a fatality crash, you absolutely have to have your drug testing results along with your alcohol testing results. Without that, you're not getting anywhere. They will shut it down and deny it because you don't have those records. Otherwise, if you're a driver and you want to file your own request for review, you can do that. There's nothing that says that you can't. Some reasons you would file it, as I mentioned before, maybe you got a violation related to your CDL, and that violation wasn't justified because there was an issue with the state system. As an example, I have a client right now who's filing a DataQ that one of their drivers got a CDL violation, but there was an issue with the state, and the state actually sent them paperwork indicating that, yep, it was their mistake. So that one should get overturned because it does happen. Contrary to popular belief, states do make mistakes, and officers do make mistakes. So when it comes to that kind of process, and you as a driver are going to submit a request, just remember you want to submit every single piece of information that you can that you feel supports your position. It's much better to submit everything right off the bat rather than having to dribble and drab this information across. Most states will tell you that you're missing information, that they need more information, and they will hopefully tell you what they are asking you for and the reason why they're asking you for it. So those are some real brief tips and tricks for the DataQs and how you go about submitting one. And I do it for a lot of my clients. I don't do it for all of them, but I do it for a lot of them, just based on my level of expertise with the DataQ system.
That's great. Well, I appreciate that. And we always love tips for drivers or fleets on this podcast. So anything that can help streamline that process and make it easier on everybody involved, I think is a good thing. So thank you for that, Chris. And that actually brings me over back to you, Zaheer. I'd like to ask you, If you have any tips or tricks for drivers where the PSP is concerned, anything that you think that they should know about, how to access what Tyler Tech is doing with the PSP or anything like that. I don't want to leave any of that information out on the table here. So if there's anything that you could tell the drivers about what Tyler Technologies is doing with the PSP and how they can access it or use it, I'd love to hear it from you.
So for the drivers, there is a service called PSP monitoring service, which is only for the use of drivers. And it's like the MVR monitoring. So every time there's a change to their record, something is added or removed, they receive alerts. And they can go, pull their report and see what's going on. If they are not happy with it, they can always, submit an RDR through the DataQs, and FMCSA will look into it. And if it can be fixed, if it's a mistake, they'll certainly fix it. So this service is free. There's no charge for it. And so it's a great service. The adoption rate is pretty high, and it's for drivers only because it's their own report. We all know that PSP is the pre-employment report, and it is run only for the employment purposes. Mm-hmm. So this is something I'd like to share with the drivers, that please, if you get an opportunity, enroll in the PSP monitoring service. And it's good for the fleets too, because it speaks volumes of the safety consciousness, which means if a driver is monitoring, it's like a credit report. Somebody's monitoring their credit report, it means they're cautious and careful and responsible about it. So it speaks of the responsibility and its safety if they're on top of their record, which is good for the driver and good for the company.
Absolutely. Well, and I remember when we were first talking over cocktails on the pool deck in Las Vegas, that was what you said to me that really sold me on it, Zaheer, was that, it's a free service, and that's great. Everybody loves something that they can get for free. But when you kind of compared it to a credit reporting service, it's a way to keep your thumb on all that information and know it. And just from speaking with drivers on this show, all the time, and every different kind of driver you can imagine, whether they be brand new or they be in the industry for 30 years plus, they all really like to have all their information and know where they can access it, have it in one place so they can keep track of it. That seems to be something very common that I've noticed about drivers on this program. And so I think the monitoring system is a great way for them to get a hold of their information and just have it there so that if anything changes, they can be alerted. Is there a website or any place that they need to go, Zaheer, to enroll in the monitoring program?
Sure. They go to the PSP website, and then there's a button. It's very easy. It's very user-friendly, and there are literally just 3 to 4 steps.
Oh, perfect.
So very easy to enroll, and there's no obligation at all. They can unsubscribe anytime. They can resubscribe anytime. So it's a free service, and I would take advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if it's user-friendly, like you said there, and an easy process. Jason, from the fleet side, with respect to the PSP monitoring system, I imagine that's something you'd like to see your drivers have if they wanted it. Obviously, it's a personal decision for them, but if you notice drivers were using that from your fleet perspective and your involvement in the safety of said fleet, what would be your thoughts on that? Are you jumping up and down? Are you really excited that you're seeing a driver show that type of initiative?
Yeah, I think, honestly, the whole driving force is made up of a group of people that come from different age groups, that are more technology friendly and less technology friendly. So we see the whole mixed bag. For ease of use for this episode, we'll make sure that the link directly to that service is posted on our website, the podcast.liquidtrucking.com, on this episode, so that if you are a driver and you're listening on this episode, you could go to podcast.liquidtrucking.com, find this episode, and be able to click right to it. We'll do that. In addition, the company, Liquid Trucking, is using some technology services that aggregate that data for hiring and then continuous monitoring. So we're engaged with it. And if you're ever unsure and you want to just stop into the safety office and talk to us about it, or look at your latest monitoring file inside of our system, we're pretty much an open book. We'll pull up the system that we use that aggregates your PSP data and your MVR data into one view and kind of look at your own record, because it's a good opportunity for us to talk to drivers and show them that system. And maybe they want to stop back in 6 months and look at it again. Now, it might not have anything change, but we are using technology like that, and happy that it's out there. I will add one nerdier thing. I wanted to ask Chris, Zaheer, or both, but and I might mispronounce this, but the MCMIS is I believe, the core database or motor carrier management information system that is housing all of the data that is being entered, and the PSP is kind of maybe a filter and access into that roadside and crash data. Do I have that somewhat correct?
I'll jump in here real quick, and you are correct. Motor carrier management information system, that is the kind of repository for all of the information across all of the different platforms that different states use. It filters all down into that, and that's how a carrier actually gets the information relayed to them, even though you may access it through a different platform or a different database. That is exactly correct. So, and I just, before Zaheer jumps in here real quick, I did want to mention too, we've got the PSP monitoring aspect for the drivers and all the technology that's out there. Don't forget that there are states out there that offer a very similar monitoring system to PSP monitoring on the driver's side for a client side. As an example, in Wisconsin, we have a system called PARS, which means that you as a client or a carrier can register a person under your information, and it will provide you the exact same information that the PSP monitoring reports, but they won't tell you the change. They'll just notify you that there was a change to the driver licensing product and that you may want to have a talk with that driver. So I just wanted to throw that out there real quick before Zaheer jumped in.
Okay, absolutely. Zaheer, to Jason's question there, anything to add to what Chris just said?
Well, Chris just nailed it. I mean, that's PSP gets the reports from MCMIS. That is correct, which is a federal database, and all states report to MCMIS. And that's one of the reasons we don't run the DataQs, because Tyler does not modify, adjudicate, or alter any records. We don't touch the data. We just report on it. So
Understood.
Yeah.
Well, I have just an off-the-wall question to ask all three of you gentlemen. How is it that you guys deal with this onslaught of acronyms all the time? I would be just completely lost in the alphabet soup of it all, but you guys seem to be able to keep it really straight. Does that come from experience, or is that something that you have to practice, Chris?
Well, so I will say that when I first started my career in law enforcement, it was something that I definitely had to get used to. So that acronyms for me didn't really come until I completed that second stage of training as an inspector, meaning I had to go through all the federal classes, Part A, Part B. Part B is the equipment side of things. Once I went through that, then I had to do 32 level 1 inspections roadside with a supervised or a certified inspector. And then that's when the acronyms really started to flood in. And they didn't get real bad until the last 4 years, because on the motor carrier investigation unit for the State Patrol in Wisconsin, we just access so much more than the guys do roadside that there was probably 3 or 4 more acronyms that ended up coming in there: MCMIS, SAFER, ANI, SMS, the CSA prioritization, all of these different things that are actually streamlined on the back end, but on the front end, everything looks compartmentalized and of a different nature than the next thing that you look at. But once you start realizing that all of that data just filters into a central repository of information, then it becomes a little bit easier. But it was definitely an adjustment. I will say that.
Yeah, a bit of a learning curve there. And Zaheer, I'm sure for you, with your work with the government and everything, the acronym thing is just old hat for you at this point, I assume.
Oh yeah. I work for the U.S. military, and they use a lot of acronyms. So
Absolutely.
when I joined first, it was pretty hard, because all, they're acronyms for phrases, for different things, and their names if you're especially working in a war zone, so you have like acronyms for like supermarket, right? So and then they have other code words too. So that I got that from the military, and then with the FDA and the UN. So UN uses a lot of acronyms. So I would say this industry, FMCSA, is not bad at all with acronyms.
Okay. All
So
right.
in comparison to other agencies I work with.
Sure. And another kind of interesting parallel there is the U.S. military speaks its own language, much like the trucking industry and truck drivers speak their own
Sure.
language, right?
Yeah.
It takes a little while to learn it, but once you do, you're part of the family. So, well, gentlemen, listen, this has been a fantastic conversation as far as just the information you guys are providing. I've learned so much sitting here with you for the last 40 minutes or so. But I know you're all busy, so I want to get you back to the things that are up on the priority list. I always make room for final thoughts on this show for every guest that comes on, though, and we're going to do that right now. I'll kick it to Jason first since he's got some experience with it, but Chris and Zaheer, the final thoughts segment is open for anything that you might want to bring up, anything that we've left off the table, or if you just want to give a shout out to somebody that might be listening, we're good for that too. So let's get into our final thoughts here on the Liquid Trucking Podcast for this break. Jason Eisenman, VP of HR and Safety at Liquid Trucking. Always a pleasure to have you. Final thoughts from you today, my friend.
Yeah, closing thoughts for me. I really appreciate the opportunity to keep bringing good content to our fleet. We kind of have this submersive, or immersive learning, safety, culture, environment that we're trying to build for the betterment of all of our folks and everybody that they motor with out there on the road. So to have someone like Chris and Zaheer on here and that talk about this and educate on acronyms and all of these different systems and how they affect hard driving force. It's just a big thanks and hope everybody enjoyed it.
Appreciate it, Jason. Great to have you in, as always. Zaheer Iqbal, Program and Education Analyst for Tyler Technologies. Can't thank you enough for coming on here, and can't tell you how much I can't wait to get back to Vegas to get on another pool deck with you and talk shop. Final thoughts from you today, Zaheer?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your show. And I go to conferences and events and trade shows to connect with people and talk about our program. And this is such a great opportunity. I'm sure you have a big audience, and I'm sure there are a lot of drivers out there listening to us. So I want to thank them as well for their service, because I truly believe that America runs on trucking, because the economy runs on trucking. So it's such an important profession and industry. And this is such a great industry because people are so welcoming. To the drivers, I'd like to reiterate that please check out the monitoring piece. It's free and it brings a lot of value. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, Zaheer, and thank you for being here, and we will make sure to link that in the information to this episode. So if you're on the website right now listening to this, you can find it right there in the description. If you're not on the website, head on over to podcast.liquidtrucking.com to get a link where you can find that PSP monitoring service and get yourself enrolled in that free of charge. Zaheer, it's been a pleasure to have you here. We will definitely bring you back later on in the life of this show. Thank you so much. Finally, last but certainly not least, Chris Caldwell, safety consultant for Safety Management Services Company. Final thoughts from you today, my friend. Thank you so much for being here. The pleasure is all ours. We really do appreciate you coming on and sharing everything with us today. But I'll make some room for final thoughts for you as well.
Sure. Well, thank you. I do appreciate it. I used to always end my teaching sessions with explaining to my students that it's always an honor to be selected to come and teach them and impart my knowledge on them and hopefully get them on the right path from the enforcement side of things. So I think that's vitally important. And to all the drivers that are out there listening, just remember, either you are, as Zahir said, you're the lifeblood of this industry. Don't forget it, but with a caveat, don't let it go to your head either. Remember that you are a representative of the company, and it takes this good-natured symbiotic relationship between you as the driver and your management staff to cultivate the correct culture and to do the right thing when you're out on the roadway. Don't ever feel afraid to admit that you did something wrong. I can tell you that I've admitted I did something wrong at least 4 times this week, and it's not even Friday yet. So just remember that being upfront and being honest, especially with your management team and the people that you deal with on a daily basis, is a great course of action to take. And just try to be professional at all times. I know that it's hard, especially given what I've seen on the roadway in my travels. So just remember to do the best you can, and remember that mistakes are human nature, and that if you do make one, just be honest and upfront with your management staff so that they can do what they need to do, which is going to be to address the situation probably on several different fronts.
Sage advice there from a guy who's had his feet on both sides of the aisle here. So heed that very wisely. Thank you so much, Chris, Zaheer, and Jason for being with me today. We'll be right back here on the Liquid Trucking Podcast. Stick around. Man, so much good information in that talk. I got to say another huge thanks to Jason, Chris, and Zaheer. Guys with that type of experience, you get a half an hour or an hour to sit down and talk to them, sit down and talk to them, man. I had such a great conversation with Zaheer poolside in Vegas. Now, of course, we weren't like actually hanging at the pool. It was a cocktail mixer for the convention that we went to. I really wanted to get in the pool because it was like 1,000 degrees out there, but fortunately it was all shaded. It was up on the top of the Cosmopolitan, and Zaheer, great guy, struck up a conversation with him. I'll tell you this, one of the best dressed dudes at the whole convention, and it was like that every single day. Always just tuned up to the nines, this guy with the drip, okay, as the kids call it. Lots of style there, but a great dude, and now I think we can call him friend of the show. We'll be getting him back on for sure sometime out in the future. And Chris Caldwell, you just don't get experience like he has. He was an enforcement officer, and now he helps trucking companies deal with enforcement action and try to prevent enforcement action and just try to be safer. And I think that type of expertise is something you really got to pay close attention to, because Chris said something in that interview that was so poignant and hit the nail right on the head, and that was about the perspectives. Drivers versus fleets, drivers versus law enforcement, drivers versus Department of Transportation. It goes on and on and on. One thing we identify on this podcast all the time is that the drivers have the perspective of the driver because they're out there in the weeds. And while not everything in this world is opinion or fact-based or data-driven, we feel that we can get a lot of really damn good feedback from the drivers and learn a lot about what's going on out there on the road. It's one of the reasons this podcast is even a thing. So huge hats off to Zaheer, Chris, and Jason for bringing all that information to us. Thank you guys so much. Again, we'll get them back on, but you know, this episode, it's going to run just a couple minutes short of an hour based on my math, which was always my worst subject in school. So if it's like an hour and 15 minutes, you'll understand who was crunching the numbers. But we gave you almost a 2-hour episode last week. And let me tell you, I heard it from my editor about that. I know it was tongue-in-cheek, and he said thanks for it, like he enjoyed the extra hour of work that he got on my behalf. But I don't think he enjoyed it that much, so I'm going to try to give him just a standard week of work and close this one out at about an hour. Don't forget to head over to podcast.liquidtrucking.com. It's everything for us, and you guys have made it that. It's a sweet website. There's plenty there. You can also send me an email, as I said off the top, podcast@liquidtrucking.com. It's that simple. Love to hear from you. That's it for episode 87 of the Liquid Trucking Podcast. I've been Marcus. You've been you. Appreciate you all clicking and downloading today. We will see you next week when we debut a new recurring segment on the show and get some more drivers in here to talk shop. I'm not going to tell you what it's about yet. You're going to have to stay tuned for that. We'll see you next week for episode 88. Keep the shiny side up and stay safe out there, Liquid Trucking.
Thanks for tuning in and being the gold standard of drivers on the road. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and tune in next week for another episode of the Liquid Trucking Podcast.
Interested in finding out more about what it takes to bring a podcast like the Liquid Trucking Podcast to your fleet? Bulldog provides tailor-made top-to-bottom podcast production services. We'll meet your terminal staff, connect with your drivers, and bring you the content you want your drivers to hear. Type bulldog.works into your browser to connect with us and learn more about what we can do for your fleet. That's bulldog.works for podcasts, tenacious recruiting, and more.